So you finally made it to the end of this dissertation, and all that stands between you and being doctor is one more chapter called the discussion. And you're like, what else am I supposed to say? There's nothing else to say. Well, that's what this video is about. I'm going to be talking to you about how to write your chapter 5, your discussion chapter. Hi, I am Dr. Marvette Lacy. I help doctoral students finish their dissertation in 12 months or less so they can finally graduate and be doctor. And today we are talking about the discussion chapter. But before we get too far off into this, if any of this resonates with you, I want you to go ahead and check out the Qual Scholars membership. It's all about giving you the tools, the resources, and support you need to finish your dissertation. You can find out more at the link below. But today, we are talking about discussion. I remember getting to my last chapter and being like, I don't have it. I don't have anything else to say. So first, what I want you to think about is, are you ready to write your discussion section, right? Have you gone back and updated the rest of your chapters? Have you made your edits to your introduction, to your literature review, to your method section, right? That matters. Update it, changing the language and the tense to past tense because you did it already, right? Making sure that the literature matches what you actually talked about in your findings. And if you're like, well, girl, I haven't written my findings section yet, I'm going to invite you to go. I'm going to point right here to this video. I just did a video on how to write your chapter 4, your findings, right? So first you want to make sure, are you prepared to write your discussion? Because your discussion is about, you are now doctor, you are the expert, and you are telling us what we need to do as a result of all this amazing project that you have completed. And it would be challenging for you to tell us what to do if you're not sure about what you've written or said in the previous chapter. So first, go back and do that. Second, discussions are all about, what are your interpretations of the data, right? So in your proposal, you outline problems that you are addressing. You told us a very clear purpose for this research, right? You identified research questions, right? You told us about the literature that supports this problem, this purpose, and how you came to the questions, right? You told us what you were going to do. You told us how you set up the project, right? What methods how you're going to get the data and how you're going to analyze it, right? And then in your findings in your chapter 4, you told us what the data said, right? But now chapter 5 is all about, but what does that data mean and what do we do now? So that means I'm going to need to hear from you, doctor. I am eagerly anticipating what we should do. Think about if you had 10 minutes with a decision maker, right? A stakeholder, like thinking about your research. Who is a person that you can bring to mind that has a lot of power and who can change things quickly? Like if you gave them the solution, they could implement it and solve the problem that you outline in your proposal. Think about that person. And if you had 10 minutes to talk to them, what would you tell them? What would you tell them to do? What would you tell them to consider? What would you tell them to change, right? What would you tell them to think more about? That is what goes into chapter 5. So first you want to write your discussion section or your interpretations, right? This is what came up from the data. Here's what I think we need to do about it. Right, here's how, my understanding of it. Then you want to go into, and I'm looking at my notes if you see me looking over, then you want to go into implications, right? So the discussions is your interpretation as the expert. The implications section is, what does the literature have to say? What is the conversation between the literature and your data? Right? Because your data revealed some things, right? The major points that you made in your findings section. Now what you want to do is take those major points and reconnect it back to the existing literature. Does it match the existing literature? Does it differ in some ways? Are there some parallels? Are there some deeper, more nuanced things that you found in your data? That's what we want in this implication section. You want to have a conversation between your data, yourself, and the literature. Right, so we got discussions, implications. Next, you want to talk about research study boundaries. Other people would call this section limitations. Words mean things, people, and limitations, there are no limitations, especially in terms of qualitative research, right? Because most people will say, oh, the study wasn't generalizable because there was such a small number of participants. Well, no shit, it's qualitative research. Yes, there are qualitative projects where you can have a large number of people, but most of you who are doing dissertation projects, you're not having a lot of participants, right? We're not going to be on the level of quantitative research where we have like thousands and hundreds of people participating, right? You're going to have a smaller number, which is the point, because the whole point of qualitative is to go deep, right? To go deep with a small number of people. So no, it's not supposed to be generalizable. So let's get that language out. Instead, what we want to know is, what is the particular context in which you conducted your research within? Is it a particular region of the world? Is it a particular state? Is it a particular program? Is there a particular type of participant, right? Are there identities that you chose to focus on? Are there factors that you chose to focus on, right, that we may need to know as the reader in order to fully understand this data and this discussion, right? You may say things like, well, I was only at one research institution in the Northeast in a small town of about 50,000 people. I'm just making this up, right? And so while we can make some broad assumptions about people who fit this particular profile, right, we may not be, this may differ for someone who's at a research one institution in the Southwest, right? You kind of get what I'm saying? I just need to know, what are the boundaries of your project? That's what you want to put. Additionally, you want to say, you know, are there any things that may come up or that did come up in this research process that you would have done differently or that you didn't anticipate for? You want to put that in this section too. And then you want to think about giving us a section about how do you know that the conclusions that you came up with are as best as possible conclusions that actually came from the data and not necessarily your own interpretation and experiences, right? That all goes into the boundary section. The next section then, which nicely leads us into future research, right? Because now you have told us what the boundaries are, right? To use that example of your research was conducted in the Northeast in a research one institution, but that may differ for somebody who lives in the Midwest, right? An opportunity for future research is to, you know, conduct the same project, but in a different region of the world, right? Or you may want to consider these identities, or you may want to consider these other factors. Those are some things that you want to put in the future research section. And I just encourage people, I love a good 3 to 5 points, right? 3 to 5 ideas for future research. And then the last section is, what are the recommendations, right? You can do, what are the recommendations for practice and what are the recommendations for research? Now, the recommendations of research could still be like the future research sections, but maybe you got some other things that didn't quite fit into future research. But primarily, what can we do in practice, right? Going back to that example, if you're talking to someone who is a decision maker and you have 10 minutes with them, what are you going to tell them to do? What are some things that they can implement right away from what you have learned from conducting this research? And how can they implement those, right? People do, when I read students chapter 5, they will say, here's what I recommend, but they don't give any details about how someone should be able to do that, right? Most people who are going to be reading your dissertation, they're going to be going to this section to see what you say to do, right? When you are presenting your work at conferences or other workshops or whatnot, people are going to want to know, what do I do? And so you want to make this section as robust as possible about telling them what they can do and giving them very tangible things. What you want to look out for is that because you've been steeped in this research and this project, that you can make some assumptions that people know things, right? You may be like, oh, that's basic. I don't need to put that as a recommendation. But what I want to encourage you to do and to stop and think about is that because you have been so steep in this research, you have more knowledge and experience than the average person. And what may be really basic to you may be mind-blowing to them. So I just say put it all in this section. Don't make any assumptions about what people know and what they don't know, right? Put it there. And that's the chapter, right? So you have an introduction, right? You have your discussion, which is your interpretations. You have the implication, which is the conversation between you, your data, and the literature. You have your research study boundaries, where some people call them limitations. You have future research, and you have recommendations, and then a conclusion. This chapter is probably going to be somewhere around 20, 30 pages. More if you like writing, right? But it's just meant to just wrap this project all in a nice bow. And so I want to thank the person who asked me to do this video. I think it would be really helpful. And that is all. Please let me know what questions you have below. Again, make sure you go ahead and check out Qual Scholars if you want more help with finishing your dissertation. I will talk to you next time. Bye for now.